All right, so this is class number 10 for U.S. government. Important for those of you watching at home. There's plenty of room in class. Has there been an outbreak at this school yet? Of anything other than the common cold? No? Good. I am not seeing a lot of attendance via video, and so if by chance you're doing that now, start doing it. We need you to pass. I'm also wanting you to get the assignments in. And the quizzes are going to start popping up this week. They'll be simple, short, and they will be popping up this week, and we're just going to keep you basically honest to the material. But you've had some reading assignments, you've had some, and you'll have some quizzes. I think once you put it all together, I think you're going to realize you've learned quite a bit. But the trick is to keep up with the video lectures if you're not coming. But if you have no problem, you're not worried about getting COVID, please come. You will learn far more than you will by the video unless you watch the video several times, which I don't really have evidence of that taking place as of yet. Not quite viral as much as I'd like to be. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about a few things. One of the assignments was I wanted you to do a current events assignment. Now, I blew it and put the wrong date on the assignment on Blackboard, so turning it in was not possible. I shall fix that, and you can do that. But I'll ask some of you here, you know, what we got if you did it. Who did at least attempted it, looked at the current events? Anybody here? If not, we can do that even as we speak. You did? Okay, so one of the things I'd like to do is talk about what is going on in our world today, because we need, given that this class is U.S. and Texas government, okay, a lot of the current events are affecting the U.S. and Texas government, even though we haven't talked about the Texas part yet. And tonight is the first debate, the presidential debate. I'm going to tell you that if you want some extra credit, I would like you to watch this debate and tell me what you hear. Tell me what the issues are. I'll put up an assignment on there for extra credit, and you can tell me what you hear, see, hear, what your thoughts are. Tell me, well, I think it's going to be on Fox News, I think, because Chris Wallace is the moderator, and Chris Wallace is a Fox News employee. I don't know if he's not an anchor, he's kind of a political commentator, pundit type. He has a show, but it's not straight news. As far as I know, it's a talk show. But don't be confused, because Chris Wallace, even though his employment is by Fox News, which is usually considered to the right, which would be more conservative, Chris Wallace is kind of known to be, he tries to play down the center, but he's a bit left of Fox News. Okay, that's not saying he's like MSNBC, but he's not exactly Sean Hannity, if anybody knows who Sean Hannity is, or Rush Limbaugh, very conservative people. Okay, so, and I think that's why Fox chose him, was because they wanted a guy that was going to be a bit more, I want to say straight down the middle, but less prototypically conservative, you know, to make it, because Fox would get accused of being biased. So there's always that bias factor going on. But don't get me wrong, CNN was even not left out of the loop on this one, because the conservatives said there's no way we're going to subject ourselves to this news organization which has been so abusive to the Republican Party. So you can see where that whole news station won't even host a debate this year. It's kind of an insult to them. So, sure Biden wouldn't have minded, but that's because he's on the other side, right? All right, so let's talk a bit about let me finish the outline. We'll talk a little bit about that, the debate. We'll talk about the goings on, that is the current events. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Article 2, the presidency, a little bit about it and how it relates to current events, because it's quite interesting what's going on. I've got some pretty good stuff, I think. So why don't you tell me what you think is happening in our world, be it Texas or even in the United States, or on the globe as it relates to the United States. It's very important. I can't tell you, especially at your age. So why don't you tell me up there what you've learned? You looked.
Well, that video we watched the other day about the judicial system really opened my mind more, and it told me not to, because I felt like the video was very biased, because it did I'm not going to say it hit the conservatives like a lot harder, but the way they portrayed McConnell, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the way they portrayed him in the video. But then again,
they made him look pretty mean.
Yeah, and then I don't know.
That's PBS. He's yeah. If you look at, they call him the turtle. Okay, because he looks like the turtle. A turtle. And he's got that neck thing going on. And so yeah, well, this is PBS, right? PBS is pretty well known to be it's public broadcasting, by the way. That's your taxpayers, tax dollars. They're not conservative. They're run by Democrats, okay? And so they are not going to like McConnell. One of the things they didn't, you got the sense where the two guys were accused of raping women.
That's what I was thinking.
Which, that they really were accused of that, but it really didn't give their defense, did it? Just allowed them to be accused with no responsibility of the accusers, okay? Which they didn't discuss that in the Kavanaugh case, the woman who accused him that there was none of her friends remember the party that she's talking about, that she says they were all at. None of them remembered it. They didn't mention that they brought in a woman who does for the Republicans, that she questioned her. Instead of the senators who would normally do it. They brought in a woman who actually investigates rape, and that woman found that if her case was brought before her, she would not pursue it as a legitimate rape case. So PBS kind of left one side of the argument off the table. Remember, beware of the sound of one hand clapping. And so PBS, you watch PBS, but other than that, I thought it's interesting. It really gave the fight over the Supreme Court. And
it was all over social media of how, what's her name, Ruth
Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, she had died, and I was just like, I don't know who this is.
She was a Supreme Court justice. So there's a fight over the majority, who holds the majority of the Supreme Court. Why? Well, it has to do with two different judicial philosophies, okay? How the Constitution is interpreted is up to the judicial branch, if you recall. And there are two major philosophies. One is you read the law, you interpret the law as it is written, okay? And if somebody is either, say, in criminal, if they're guilty of it, they either did it or they didn't do it, right? Or constitutional laws such as rights and stuff like that. You read it as it is written. And so there's this view of looking at it from original intent, or conversely, the other philosophy has to do with the living Constitution. You interpret it in light of the cultural situation, right? And you go, well, this is a good way to enact social justice. We can fix things by the way we interpret it, right? And so rather than interpret it as it is written, you would interpret it in a way to enact justice. And the judges who do this are accused of legislating from the bench. So for example, let's take the case of same-sex marriage. Well, the populations through the voting, through representation and votes have rejected same-sex marriage. The majority of Americans did not want to endorse this through the government. So what did the same-sex unions do? Well, they went through the courts and they take it, and we're going to talk a lot more about it. They go to a court that they know where the judge is going to judge in favor of them. Ninth Circuit, perhaps, which is on the West Coast. And so they take cases, they bring somebody to court for not giving them a marriage certificate. Okay? And so what they're doing is they're trying to show, they'll use these judges to say that the laws against same-sex marriage are unconstitutional, right? So they want to interpret the Constitution in light of what is going on socially. So, now this is gonna sound extreme, but what's extreme one day is normalized the next. So like 50 years ago, the idea of same-sex marriage would have been unheard of. Nobody would have even thought about it. 50 years ago, in 1970, homosexuality was out there, but usually these guys and women were very silent about it. They just went about their lives doing their things, but they weren't pushing it on each other, on us yet, and on society yet. And for legalized acceptance, where you have to accept this or you're somehow legally culpable. Well, imagine now and there are people out there who are pushing for the normalization and legalization of pedophilia. That is, the lowering of the age of consent laws for sex to have sex with minors. Now imagine you say, well, okay, there are laws against that now, and the majority of people are against that. Now, so let's imagine some group of pedophiles goes and finds a judge, an activist judge, who's willing to say, well, the laws against pedophilia are unconstitutional. Now, anybody watching this who's, on the left would be like, well, that's just ridiculous. Well, it is right now. But so too would have same-sex marriage been ridiculous 50 years ago. So what's ridiculous and outrageous now may not be later. And how do you prevent that from happening? Well, the only way to prevent that from happening is to have judges that strictly interpret the Constitution as it is and as it is written, rather than in light of cultural movements. So the cultural movement went towards, homosexuality as acceptable behavior, and they interpreted any laws that either forbade it or not forbade homosexuality, but at least didn't legalize it, such as same-sex marriage, as unconstitutional, such as state laws that said, like Obergefell, right, v. Hodges and all that. That's a famous court case that made same-sex marriage a law of the land. But any law that says we don't recognize same-sex marriages, you take that to the Supreme Court. If you get a 5-4 decision, then you win, right? And so right now the fight is over putting what are known as strict constitutionalists on the court. And so where the problem is that the liberals don't want strict constitutionalists on the court. Now, the reason is because they believe that in doing so, they'll no longer be able to use the court system to get their legislative wishes made into law through the courts. See, it's called legislating from the bench. If you can't get your laws passed through the regular process through the legislative body, then the left, which is, when I say the left, I mean the Democratic Party, tends to use the court system to try to get their will imposed upon the people if they can't get the people to impose the will. Does that make sense? That sounds kind of pejorative. I don't mean it in a charitable way either, though. I mean, I think if you know, if the people don't want to legalize something, the minority shouldn't do it, because it turns 9 people, there are 9 people on the Supreme Court, into a new legislative body, something that they weren't originally meant to be. So President Trump and the conservatives, Mitch McConnell in that video, their goal has been to get the court filled with people who will just strictly interpret the Constitution. That doesn't mean interpreting the outcome, it's the process. It doesn't guarantee, does that make sense? We may not like the outcome, but as long as it's in, if you want to change the outcome, you got to change the law. That's the goal. That way the Supreme Court, they're just calling balls and strikes. They're like umpires. Okay, it's either this way or it's not. And so what had happened when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, she was not a strict separation. She's not a strict constitutionalist. She's a living constitutionalist. She would interpret the Constitution in a very liberal way, looking at how to use the Constitution to enact social change. And so when she died, they were mad because they realized, well, it's the president who nominates justices, and this will be his third constitutionalist on the bench. And so they're realizing they're losing their power. One of the biggest fears is over Roe versus Wade, okay, which made abortion the law of the land. And so women's groups have all come out against this lady who's now Coney Barrett, who's come out. She's been nominated by President Trump, and they're all upset about her because she's a Catholic. Well, what's the problem with being Catholic? Well, Catholicism is pro-life, strictly pro-life. And if you believe truly, Joe Biden is, quote, and so is Nancy Pelosi. They're both Democrats and they're both Catholic, but they don't believe, but they're both pro-choice. They're both I don't want to say pro-abortion like they're handing out, you know, coupons to Planned Parenthood or anything, but they're pro-choice, and the Catholic Church rejects that. So they're basically rejecting the Catholic teaching on abortion. And so Amy Coney Barrett, who is a Catholic and one who actually believes in Catholicism to the degree where she practices it, liberals are upset about that because that gets in the way of abortion rights. They're afraid that she is going to be that 5th out of 9 vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. Well, what would that even take? First of all, it would take a case coming up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't just come out and say, oh, by the way, now that we got 5-4. No, a case has to come before it, challenging the law, challenging the statutes, challenging the decision now that would be overturned. Now, don't be surprised if now there will be a bunch of cases that are brought up, because just like the liberals bring cases, so too will conservatives. They'll make some laws that will be challenged, but how do they challenge laws? They challenge them in the courts to see if they're constitutional. Well, now once you have 5-4, you may find that these cases are going to be decided in a way that is more pro-life. But it's not because it's pro-life, but it's more pro-constitution, because it's a well-known fact that the, you know, Roe versus Wade was really kind of a force-fit decision. It really had to do, they're like, oh, it had to do with privacy. Well, what does privacy have to do with killing unborn babies, right? So they believe it was wrongly decided, even if they believe that abortion should be legal. Many scholars say it really doesn't fit in the Constitution. They should have amended the Constitution or something. But of course they couldn't at the time. We're talking about the will of the people. So anyway, so that's a big one. Yeah, that's huge. That is so huge. And so one of the things that has gone on with that in current events is the Speaker of the House, who is known as Nancy Pelosi. She's the ranking member of the Democratic Party, and the Speaker of the House is the majority party in Congress in the House of Representatives, and they'll vote upon her or the person to be the who's going to be representative of the Speaker of the House. Well, she's a speaker. She's the number 3 in line for the presidency. So if the president were killed and or impeached, we'll talk about that today. If the president were killed, and so too was the vice president, or if they were both impeached, well, the number 3 is the Speaker of the House. So number 1's the president. The second one is a vice president, who is the president of the Senate. He's on top of the Senate. And so he's in charge of the Senate in that regard. He resides over it, and then, or presides over it. And then there's the Speaker of the House. So you have the 3, that's your chain of command from 1 to 3, okay? And so she said she wants to impeach the president. Now we're gonna talk a little bit about that, because that's one of the articles, sections of Article 2 that we'll read a little bit about today. We're gonna talk about, the powers of the presidency. We're gonna talk about, what he does, and then we're gonna talk about removal of the president. Is there anything else that went on in the news? So we've got the judicial stuff going on. We've got the presidential debate that's going on. We're talking weeks away from the voting in the presidential election. So we've got just not only a new president coming up, we got a new Supreme Court nominee, which is a big deal. So if you're watching that, you'll see the fight over both of those. Anything else going on?
I heard about the tap water somewhere.
Oh gosh, yeah, somewhere in Houston, there's water involved in some brain-eating amoeba. Right. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, I don't want to be drinking water. I don't want a brain-eating amoeba. That's kind of gross, I make a living with my brain, so yeah, I can't do that. So that kind of worried me. Who's in charge of that? President of the United States? No, of course not. That's much more local, isn't it? So when you're in local government, those are things is that going to affect somebody more than presidential election? Yeah, absolutely right. Drinking water is a big deal. Yeah, who cares about the presidential election if you can't drink a glass of water, So that's local. So that should remind us that, local elections are very, very important to us, because they'll affect you more closely. And some people are better managers of a city than others. Now that's not to say you blame your city council for that, but I tell you what, if something goes wrong and nobody does anything about it and people are dying, and then you can start blaming the city council. You go, why didn't you do anything about this? And so yeah, that's one. That's local news. Anything else?
Bree Taylor's. Well, it was the.
Oh yeah.
The ruling of the case.
Grand jury. This didn't go to court, so keep in mind. Do you know how a grand jury works? So grand juries, people will go sit on a grand jury, and what they do is they're like a jury, but they're not judging innocence or guilt. They're just judging whether or not there's enough evidence in a case that is brought before them to charge somebody with a crime. So what happens is, let's say the case of Breonna Taylor, you've got a grand jury that has to hear arguments for several cases or charges. They bring the district attorney brings the evidence, okay, to the grand jury and says, this is the evidence we have. Do we have enough evidence here to charge them with, say, murder, manslaughter? What do we have? What can we charge them with? And they throw out a bunch of charges and a bunch of evidence. This is the evidence for murder. This is the evidence for manslaughter. This is the evidence for wanton endangerment, which that was the case, charge. And the DA makes a choice of what to try to bring. Okay, you don't want to overcharge. Okay, because if you overcharge, then it's hard to prove it, and then they walk. Okay, you charge that guy with murder, and he has a defense of self-defense, perhaps. You know, the DA has to make a choice of what he can get. Okay. Well, anyway, so it's the choice not of the DA, the district attorney, the prosecutor, that is. It's a choice of the of that grand jury as to whether or not there's enough evidence, and they have to have 9 out of 12 people to bring charges. Okay, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to, like, it to be found guilty. You have to be found guilty by everybody, right? One person can, you know, hang a jury. So, but not in a not in a grand jury, okay? Because you're just seeing if there's enough evidence to bring charges. They couldn't get 9 people to charge these guys with anything. They could get 9 people to charge one guy with wanton endangerment for just firing a bunch of shots, which ended up in killing her while she was in bed. Now, I'm sure she wasn't asleep in there after with all the gunfire going on, but nonetheless, she got hit. Okay. What does a murder charge require? Well, it requires intent.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to say, I am going to kill you. So it has to be an unjustified, intentional killing of a human. Well,
what about that girl who a couple years ago she had she murdered her kidnapper?
yeah.
She had murdered her kidnapper.
Did she murder her kidnapper, or did she kill her kidnapper?
She killed her.
Says not all killing is murder, but all murder is killing.
She killed her kidnapper because
He's a kidnapper.
yeah.
That's self-defense.
But she went to jail for it, right?
Yeah, so it might have been. I'd have to look at I'd have to look at the facts of the case. You know, she might have had what's it called? Stockholm syndrome, where the kidnapper keeps her, and then she stays on her own free will,
Mm-hmm.
and so then she kills him, but it's not to get away. It's more for whatever. I don't know. I'd have to look at the case. But in the case of Breonna Taylor, so the guy's not going, I'm coming to get Breonna Taylor. That wasn't the goal of the police officers. The goal of the police officers was to serve a warrant for drug distribution, for, you know. And so they got the wrong house. The guy said he still lived there. He didn't live there anymore. And then the new boyfriend thought the cops were coming in. He didn't know they were cops, and he started firing allegedly.
Yeah.
Which, somebody comes to my house, breaking in the house, I'm gonna start shooting too. You know, and so the grand jury sees that and goes, we can't charge these guys with murder. Murder requires intent to kill.
Yeah.
Somebody did die, but it wasn't intentional. And then, so what ends up happening is we now get a bunch of riots by a bunch of, get this, and I know it's on video, white kids. A bunch of white kids out there rioting over racism.
Did you guys see the guy with the gun, the AK? He was a teenage boy, I think like 17.
That's Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're out there rioting and looting and breaking and stealing and hurting people, and Rittenhouse and a group of guys say, we're gonna go protect this person's property. And they chase him down, and a guy pulls a gun on him and shoots at him. And he shoots the guy in the arm. He shoots another guy who hit him in the head with a skateboard, which is a lethal weapon. Okay? They were gonna kill him, at least in his mind. So the question is, did he murder them or did he kill them in self-defense? Now, in this case, the DA charged him with first-degree murder. That means the person went out there with intent to kill somebody. It was a second-degree murder. It wasn't in the heat of
Passion.
passion. My suspicion is that kid's getting off, and I mean scot-free. The video evidence, if you've watched it, where you see them chasing him down, he's running from them, he's not running at them. They knock him down, and he and then a guy hits him in the head with a skateboard, and then the guy shoots at him, and turns out that he kills 3 guys. Okay, if you watch the video, you go, "What would you do?" I would shoot too. Now, I probably wouldn't go I'd defend my house. Somebody comes to my house, I'll use my AK. I don't have an AK, but he didn't have an AK. He had a AR-15. And an AK is a Kalashnikov. That's a weapon that's used by the Russians and the Chinese, the communists, the Afghanis, all those people. Usually the people we're fighting. Yeah. America's weapon of choice is usually the M16A2 service rifle, which is now the AR-15, the one we can buy. Okay, so those are a lot of things going on. There's a lot of civil distress, isn't there? There's questions over voting right now. So there's new evidence that in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar's campaign was harvesting ballots, and there's video evidence that this guy was driving down the road with over 300 ballots in his car to try to swing an election. And so they got this on video already. All this talk about whether or not the election is going to be rigged or not, and we're already seeing stuff like this. As a matter of fact, going back to the Supreme Court, that's why it's also important, because the Supreme Court, and I'm going to discuss that in here, has been used to determine who will be the President of the United States, because in 2000, Bush v. Gore, they couldn't make that determination of who won a particular battleground state, that being Florida. It took over 30 days, I think it was 30 days, to determine that. And right now, Joe Biden was advised by Hillary Clinton to not give up no matter what, meaning not to concede this election no matter what. So this is probably going to go to court. So you're going to need to have the Supreme Justices, court justices there to make these decisions. So there you go. And who would you rather have on the bench? Somebody's going to decide who should be in there, or who actually won the election.
Who should be?
You want the one who won the election, okay? Not the person who and I put the should in quotes, I should say, who that person thinks should be in there. Right? Because I mean, if if it's just that, you get whoever's 5-4 on the bench. What if Biden wins, loses the election, but the 5 Supreme Court justices, 5 out of 9 say, yeah, but we like him anyway, let's give it to him. Yeah, you want them to read it straight, be honest with it, okay? Which I'm not saying in 2000 any of that happened. I'm just saying, yeah, we want to keep it that way. All right, well, let's take a look at, take out your Penguin Guide to the Constitution. Let's look at Article 2. And the first one we looked at was, section 1, obviously, because that usually comes before the others. And we discussed last week about the numbers of electors and how they determine that. We're talking about the Electoral College, and this is how it was established. We talked about how the Electoral College was established. We talked a little bit about its importance. All right, now there's a big debate also right now about getting rid of the Electoral College. And why would anybody want to get rid of the Electoral College? They want to go straight to popular vote. Why would you want to go to straight popular vote? Well, because there's a lot of people in California and a lot of people in New York City who are unhappy that Hillary Clinton lost the Electoral College, right? But she won the popular vote by a couple million votes. And they go, she got more people voting for her. Well, that is true. They're New Yorkers and they're Californians. But we don't deal, the states, remember, never would have ratified the Constitution if they knew that the bigger states would rule over them like this. That's why they created this, was to protect the minority from the majority. And so we vote by state, not by person. Make sense? And so we determined that the electors were determined by the number of representatives plus the number of senators in each state. and thus we get the electoral college. And you're trying to win. So when we're here in Texas, when you are voting, you're not voting to try to win the popular election of the presidency. You're trying to win the state of Texas, the popular vote in Texas, not overall. We can care less about what goes on in California as far as Texas goes, because it could be 5 million to 1 votes in California, and then it could be, 10 million to 10 million 1 votes here. Okay? That doesn't mean one side has 15 million votes, right? No. It just means California won. It's like if you win, it's in baseball, imagine a double header. Well, they play in series of 3 usually. The first game, imagine you get blown out 20-0. What does that first game have to do with the whole series? The next game could be 2-2 or 2-3 or 3-2. And then the next game be 5-11. Okay? Each individual game is each individual game, and you're trying to get 2 out of 3 to win the series. Okay? So you can get blown away in California, but who cares? Donald Trump is not going to win California, and Donald Trump is not going to win New York. It's a fact. So he's going to be concerned about what are called battleground states. He'll probably win Texas, okay? But he's not going to win California. So how much time is he going to spend going there? Not a whole lot. Why spend your resources and your money going to that state? Instead, he'll go to Ohio, very important state, Michigan, swing state, Pennsylvania. These are big states that the Democrats usually win, that Trump won last time. He'll go to Florida. Florida's always a swing state. As you see, that was the one that determined the election. So you're trying to win those electors because those are the ones that are going to swing the election. So you're trying to win those states, and they're going to be close. So you got to get those close ones. You're not going to go to California where you're just going to get your butt handed to you. You might send Pence there to go. I watched a Sarah Palin rally when McCain was running. She had a lot of people come out, but guess what? McCain got destroyed. Okay, yes?
How do you determine who's in the electoral college? Is it random?
No, the party in each, they determine. So the Democrats will have their electors. If they win the state, they send their electors to do it, okay? And the Republicans, it'll be the same, okay? So they represent the party, whoever, And there's a debate over whether or not the electors have to adhere to the party choice. Because they're the night of the election, even though it is won, okay, it's not officially won until those electors cast their ballots, right? And so when Donald Trump won, people like Hillary were telling the electors, you don't have to vote for Trump, trying to steal the election, thwart the will of the people, basically, she was saying, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about Section 2. Let's talk about some of the duties of the president. What's a president, what's his job, really? Come on. Does he just go around telling people what to do all day, having dinners, and that sounds fun.
He does treaties, I think, and
What's that?
treaties? Does he
Well, yeah, let's read a little bit about this. Let's read Section 2. The president shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices, and he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Let's stop right there. What are the branches? So the president's in charge of the military, basically. Who can name the branches of the military now?
You got the Navy.
Navy and the Army.
Marines?
Marines are part of the Navy, yes,
Air
but,
Force?
so you got, and the Air Force, Coast Guard, right? And there's a new one,
NASA or Space
Space Force. Got the Air Force and now we got the Space Force. Trump brought us the Space Force.
I think it's smart.
Yeah, well, it's required. There's more. We have the International Space Station out there. We have, there's a lot. We're not traveling in space, but right now we have all sorts of communication devices up there, spy satellites and the like, orbiting our Earth, and so we send out. We used to send out space shuttles and stuff for this. We don't use a space shuttle as much at all anymore. And so we now have a military force that's dedicated to the use of our space systems, because our space systems use spy satellites, defense weaponry. Back in the 80s, we were developing a thing called Star Wars, and that helped us outspend Russia, the USSR, which helped facilitate their downfall because they couldn't keep up in the
Space race.
well, not the space race. The space race was getting us out there going to the moon and stuff. But yeah, in weaponry. So in arms race, that's the word we should be using. So, so he will ultimately be in charge of that. Now, of course, he is not in charge of the purse. So you can't just go to war, use these people and go to war, but he can make use of them, okay? Now, we'll talk a little bit about declaring war. Can he declare war? The answer is no. All right. Now, it discusses the idea that the president has a power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Now, President Trump has done some interesting things with prison reform. Kanye West and his wife, who? What's her name? Kim Kardashian. Who would have thought these two people would have any
Impact.
significant and legitimate impact on our society after being a rapper and a influencer, yeah. Reality TV star, right? So the idea that there's people in there who have been in jail who've been over sentenced. There's a woman, I don't know her name, I forget it. She'd been in jail for over 20 years for selling pot. Something that in California is completely legal now, and it really apparently wasn't that much pot to begin with. So she's just spending just this enormous amount. She's not even like some cartel, person, Anyway, she got let out, and so basically he pardoned her. He's pardoned a few other people through this, and so prison reform has really taken a really interesting shape through President Trump, and people have received pardons for stuff like this. It's been very interesting. So if you watch the Republican National Convention, some of the people were actually highlighted on there and got to speak during it, saying if it weren't for this presidential pardon, I'd still be in jail. But so there's a good use of it, and sometimes it can be abused. Goes on to say he shall have, and it says he, but one day there shall be this person, yes, and shall have the power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur, and he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors to other and public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, here we are, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for. Okay, we can keep going, but let's talk a little bit about that right there. Making treaties. So the president can make treaties. However, to ratify them, to actually make them official, really requires the Senate to do it. And 2/3 of the Senate must ratify a treaty. So there was what was known when Donald Trump was running for office, we had what was known as the Iran, quote, deal. They didn't call it the Iran Treaty. There was a deal made with Iran about their nuclear weapons and development. Well, it was highly controversial. The Republicans were completely against it, and pallets of money were given to Iran. Iran is the #1 nation in the world who they support terrorism. So if there's terrorist activity on Earth, you can guarantee that it is financially backed by the Iranian government. Okay, the Iranians, they're an enemy of the United States. They do not like us. So in an attempt to make a deal with them, Trump saw this as completely a bad deal. The Republican, it did not have what's called bipartisan support. Bipartisan support is when both sides agree on it. Okay, so it really wasn't going to go anywhere. So what ended up happening is a deal was made, but it was made by the president. Okay, and President Obama said, well, I may not have their support. Now this is a direct quote, but this part is, he says, I do have my phone and my pen, right? And so he made it like he can make executive orders, but those are not, don't have the strength of treaties, and they don't have the strength of laws, right? So if, let's imagine the president says, I'm creating an executive order that you no longer can go to church. Well, somebody's going to take that to court, and the court's going to say, yeah, you can't do that, okay? With the exception of extreme circumstances, say COVID, where we're locking down everybody. But what if he says, we're locking down just churches and everybody can go to the baseball games and all that? Then they'd say, well, no, now you're showing favoritism to some, and so the court would. So anyway, the point being is, while the president can make use of executive orders and can make deals with countries, they do not have the strength of treaties. And so what happened was Trump said before he became president, he said, you elect me, I'll tear that deal up because it's a horrible deal. What did he do when he got into office? He tore that deal up. Okay. Now a lot of European countries were upset, and he's like, well, hey, want a treaty, right? Because what does a treaty take? 2/3 of the Senate, and 2/3 of the Senate did not agree with President Obama, so they didn't ratify it. Now, you go, is that a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think? It's called a check on the president. It means he could try to make a treaty, but if he doesn't have the backing of the Senate, it says he's not that powerful. He's not a king, right? Kings have all that power. Presidents do not. And if the president doesn't have the will of those who are elected by the people, right? Well, guess what? He's been checked by the political power of the populace. Now, for those who who did like President Obama, you go, well, those jerks in the Senate. Well, guess what? Those jerks in the Senate were voted in by the people, okay? And so it just showed that the majority of the voters in that case, the states that is, because the Senate represents the states, just didn't want it. Didn't trust the deal. Okay, not personal. All right. I mean, it could go both ways. Keep in mind, if President Trump loses the Senate, which is quite possible, right? So the Democrats want to flip the Senate into the Democrats' hands. Certainly, if President Trump wins and loses the Senate, do you think anything's going to get done?
Mm-hmm.
You think any of his judicial nominations are going to be appointed? No. He would have to appoint judges that are actually appointable by the liberal majority.
Mhm.
So they're not gonna be the ones he wants. So you might just leave them empty. And that's why so many were left empty by President Obama. He didn't have the Senate to confirm them. And so when President Trump got into office, what did he do? Build this record number of judges. Okay, here, anyway, so that's the second part of this, is that he shall nominate and by with the advice and consent, that the key word is there, consent, of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors and other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States. Okay? Very powerful to be able to shape the judicial branch of the government. Okay? The presidency is a very powerful thing, but he doesn't just put up judges he wants. He has to have the consent of the Senate. And that's why it's important when you vote that you go, I sure hope the president has my party's backing in the Senate. So if you're a Democrat, you not only want Democrats have the majority in the House right now, House Representatives, okay? But you don't want just the House majority in the House of Representatives. You want the majority in the Senate, and you want the presidency, because if you get that, then you get the laws passed that you wanted to, without having anybody really getting in your way as much. Okay? All right. Let's move on to section 3, where it says, he shall from time to time give to Congress information of the state of the Union, and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. He may on extraordinary occasions convene both houses, or either of them, and in the case of disagreement between them, with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers, and he shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, and shall commission all officers of the United States. There's a lot being said here. Let's start with the last part of him faithfully executing the laws. If there's a law in the land, he is the executive branch, right? The presidency. Is the president responsible for executing the laws? So if there was a law, is the president doing something immoral by executing it? Now keep in mind, the president isn't merely the executive branch. I mean, he's the head of it, but there's a lot of controversy over, like, say, immigration law and ICE, immigration customs, right? Enforcement. Which, by the way, was originated to combat terrorism. But they also do border enforcement, right? Is it immoral to enforce border laws? They are the laws. Now the question is, are the laws immoral? Now if the laws are immoral, then you get rid of the laws, correct? But laws are generally constitutional or unconstitutional, okay? The moral issue has to do with whether or not it follows that higher law of natural law, correct? So should we enforce our laws? You say yes?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's certain laws we certainly should. That whole idea of murder is illegal, right? Should we enforce that? How do you enforce laws? What do you do? What do you do? Create police officers, agencies to do it, right? ICE would be one of them. Immigration would just be one. What about drug use is another? You know, if you're gonna make something illegal, you must enforce it. And so it's, the president is responsible for executing the laws, faithfully executing the laws of the land. That is specifically the federal laws, okay? The state and local laws are up to the state and local, governments, okay? So when you see in Minnesota, Minneapolis, I think it is, that they're getting rid of their police departments. They voted to disband, to defund their police.
I saw one.
What's that?
I saw the news article.
Yeah, now, another news article is now they're all mad because crime went up. And so now they're having buyer's remorse, okay? Well, you get what you pay for. You get rid of policing, what happens? Crime goes up. Still illegal, but what are you gonna do about it, right? So, I mean, all these people, get rid of the police and then all of a sudden they break in their house, who are you gonna call? What are you gonna do? Who's gonna arrest them? You can have somebody charged, but you first have to be arrested.
Make a citizen's arrest.
Yeah, you can. There's such thing as private person's arrest, yeah, for sure. Is that thing still rolling? Cause my phone just went off and, yeah, good, okay. All right, so faithfully executing the laws of the land, and keep in mind, these are federal laws that we're talking about there. So which brings us to a thing, and I'm gonna go backwards to the State of the Union address that it just discussed. That the president's, one of the tasks is for the president to tell Congress, tell our government, tell its people, the State of the Union. What state are we in? Is it good? Is it bad? What can we do? Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any requests? I'm not gonna start with that one. I'm gonna start with this one because part of the the executing of the laws of the land, part of the things that were going on was things that are going on right now. You mentioned Breonna Taylor, and I said that there are a bunch of riots and stuff, and I don't believe they have a whole lot to do with Breonna Taylor. I think Breonna Taylor is an excuse, okay? There are people who are protesting Breonna Taylor, and they're saying, we think something's wrong here, okay? But then there are riots going on. Does that make sense? And there's looting going on. What does breaking into a store, bringing up a U-Haul, and filling it up with the goods of the store have anything to do with that shooting? Nothing, okay? It's an excuse. And Antifa, and there's groups within Black Lives Matter that are doing this, okay? And Antifa and Black Lives Matter, I told you, are what? Marxist. What does Marxist mean?
Communism.
What is communism?
Everyone created equal.
No, they reject the idea of creation. Marxism rejects God. You can't be created equal if there's no creator. Make sense? So but they are trying to create an egalitarian society where all the outcomes are the same, which is odd about the way these guys are going about it. But one of the things they're trying to do is make use of what's called revolution. What's revolution?
Abolishing your government.
Yeah, they're trying to overthrow the government in a weird way. And here's a quick question. Does the president have a right to charge them, that is, execute the laws against overthrowing a government? No?
It's in the Constitution that we have a right to overthrow our government.
No. Where is it you think, where did you get that? And it's not the Constitution.
The Declaration.
That's correct, Declaration. It does say we have a right to alter or abolish the government, right? Okay, that's correct. Okay, that's fine. If what? The government is not securing the rights of man. Does that make sense? So, the question is that the motivation behind not the demonstrators? I want to make a distinction between those who are demonstrating for change to bring awareness to stupidity, bad laws such as the no-knock laws. Breonna Taylor was, they called it a no-knock warrant where they just entered without announcing themselves. Turned out they did announce themselves, but even though it was a no-knock warrant. But maybe say they're protesting and saying, okay, or police shootings that you get bad police who shoot people who are targeting people of race. Okay, So you go, well, is that the whole government, or is that all, the whole police? Are all police like that? Well, some people believe that the police departments have become systematically racist, and thus we need to change that in a way to change it, alter it. That's fair. Would you not agree with that? I think that's a fair thing. If it is true, okay, if it's true, you want to put in preventative measures to keep that from happening, because the government's job is to do what? Secure the rights of man. But that's not the goal of Antifa. And that's not the goal of certain members, actually, of Black Lives Matter as a corporation. The Black Lives Matter corporation wants to alter, to change, to abolish, I should say, our U.S. Constitution, change governments, okay, into a more Marxist government. They want to abolish the family, as it is seen already. You should look into this. It's pretty interesting. They've changed their website though recently after a bunch of backlash from it. Okay. So what happens when you're trying to overthrow the duly elected government? Well, the government itself has laws against it being overthrown. And so can the president do something to these people? Well, the Declaration is not the Constitution. It does say, according to natural laws, that according to the natural law, the government is not protecting or securing these rights, that we should alter or abolish it. That is, if it is legitimately a tyrannical government, then we have a natural right to abolish it. That does not mean it'll be easier, that we should do it without having to shoot people, okay? I mean, that's what happened during the Revolutionary War. That's right. That's what they did. But what if it's a just government trying to be overthrown by unjust people, by another unjust form of government? I mean, there's been no just form of communism on the face of this earth, in the history of earth and the history of communism. And you look at these guys going around beating up innocent people, breaking into stores, and you ask the question, is this the group of people we want to put in charge? Well, anyway, so there are laws on that, treason laws, right? So subsection 2381, right, of the USC, the treason, sedition, and subversive activities laws says something to this. Whoever owing allegiance, that would be citizens, right, to the United States, levies war against them, or adheres to their enemies, giving them aid or comfort within the United States or elsewhere, is guilty of treason, and shall suffer death, or shall be imprisoned not less than 5 years, and fined under this title, but not less than $10,000, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. That's treason. Okay? Rebellion or insurrection. Maybe perhaps these guys are just being rebellious and insurrection, right? Doing that. Whoever incites, sets foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and shall be incapable of holding office in the United States. Finally, let me see here. No, 2 more. This is the one that they are suggesting, because one of the things I want you guys to notice in the news is every night in Portland and Seattle has been a riot for over 100 days. And they're breaking into stores and stopping cars. What's gonna happen? Have you seen them stop cars on the streets? Well, you guys gotta pay attention. Okay? Where they're getting in the roads, stopping cars. Some cars are like, I'm not stopping, I'm just gonna run you over. And some people are getting hit. And some people are getting pulled out of their cars and beat up. And people have died. Okay, this is a major thing. And these people really want to overthrow the government. So one of the things that's been going on, especially with the presidential debate tonight, here's your assignment, watch the videos. Get online and look up Portland riots, Seattle riots, okay? Riots in Kentucky. Okay, look them up because you gotta see, go through the videos, okay? Look up Black Lives Matter protests, okay? See what they're yelling. Look up Antifa, Antifa. You gotta watch this stuff and ask yourself, do you wanna be the person stuck in the car? Do you want that to be your business? How much time we have left? 1 minute? 2 minutes?
10 minutes.
2 minutes. I want you to watch it. Let me read. So there's been, because the mayors have been inciting this stuff, and not inciting, but allowing it in so many ways, President Trump has been saying, we can use the Sedition Act. What I'm about to read. Okay? If two or more persons in any state or territory or any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law in the United States, or by force to seize, take, possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Okay? The idea is that these governors and mayors have not been protecting their citizens from these rioters and looters and arsons. You know the kid Rittenhouse, the guy who shot those guys? That was in the middle of a riot, okay? That had been going on. And so, should the government have stepped in before that kid and his friends decided to do something? Yeah.
Yes.
Why did the kid step up? Because the government was not. Okay? So the president says, well, if you guys aren't going to do it, perhaps we'll use the Sedition Act. And we'll put down these rebellions. And they were toppling a bunch of statues and stuff, right? And he said, you do this, we're going to charge you 20 years. We're going to put you in jail for 20 years. How many statues have been toppled since then? 0. So he starts putting real. So what does that have to do with? That has to do with the president executing the laws of the land. If you execute the laws of the land, well, people stop breaking them. Tends to be the case. All right, you could hit that.